is Wednesday, May 21st, 2025 at 5:05 p.m. in the Dewey Room of the 1887 building. And Mr. Tyler, would you call the meeting to order?
Yes, the meeting's been properly noticed. I'll do roll call. Mr. Andre.
Here.
Eric Gordon.
Here.
Mrs. Ingersoll.
Here.
Mrs. Kosbach.
Here.
Mrs. Recrease.
Here.
Mr. Scarrow.
Here.
Mrs. Vaughn.
Here.
We do have, it is like the budget hearing, there is not an action item other than to go to close so that we could have an opportunity for the board to discuss specifics related to the personnel. When we get to that point, when the high school, middle school discuss their levels, they'll keep that at the non-specific individual basis. And then if there's questions,
Okay.
we can do that in closed session as it relates to specific personnel.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Trim.
So tonight is, I guess we'll call it version 2 of the budget retreat. As you know, at our last meeting, we had a lot of focus talking about a number of budget items, forecasts, and particularly programs and staffing at the elementary level. And tonight, Mr. McBurney, Mr. Keel, and Mrs. Boschiger talk about the middle school and high school component. Before we get into that, I wanted to just give you a quick update on what we know is going on at the state, federal level, and how that may impact our school district. We don't have a lot of information at this point, but I thought we'd start there. I think the other thing you wanted to get some information on was student fees, so I did a little survey and I got that to share with you. You kind of see what other districts are doing in that regard. Talk a little bit about maybe a Fund 80 policy. If you talk about some Fund 80 programs, that's probably something we'll want to get in place. And then get into the kind of updated reductions and maybe new revenue summary sheet. You've seen it at the last meeting. We'll just kind of go through any questions you have with that. I put together an updated forecast model and then kind of our next step and then a potential closed session. So with that state budget update, you know, we're at the point right now where discussions are really just beginning probably now that joint finance has completed their hearings. And I know there's some interest between the legislature in terms of looking at tax, property tax relief, other type of reductions. And of course, the governor wants to talk about more than just that. So they're kind of at a point where they'll be hopefully meeting, what I heard today, sometime in the next couple of weeks to kind of go through a lot of that budget detail. The School Board Association put this together, and I wanted to share with the board because the special ed piece seems to be something that's gaining a little traction in terms of maybe that's an area there may be some receptive ideas of increasing some funding that could help school districts. And there's really 2 different kind of special ed areas where the state comes in. There's what's called high costs. And then there's the regular reimbursement of special ed. And I thought this article did a really nice job of kind of explaining that there are differences between these two. And unless you kind of understand that, on the surface, if they put more money simply in the high cost category, that may help a little bit, but it really, if you want to, get the most or the most in terms of benefiting kids in Wisconsin, it really comes down to the regular special education funding. The first category at the high cost is to give you kind of a little bit of information. Although the reimbursement is up to 90% for the cost of students that cost above the $30,000 per student level, that's what the state law indicates. Since it is a sum certain allocation and about $14 million, the actual reimbursement for this year is going to be closer to about 25%. So even though 90% is kind of the goal, it's nowhere near that kind of reimbursement. So that's the high cost special ed component. The other one is just regular special ed reimbursement. And here you're talking about a lot more dollars, $575 million compared to 14 million. So it makes a difference in terms of when you hear politicians, governor, doesn't matter who it is, about increasing one or the other, the special ed reimbursement is really where we get the most bang for our buck. And to get a sense of how that affects our school district, I have. $127 revenues. State sources, high cost special education, we budgeted about $25,000 this year for reimbursement. Last year we got about 45,000, so we're pretty conservative. But compare that to the special ed dollars of $2.2 million. So if you're going to increase one of these by 10% or 20%, obviously the special ed aid is the best thing for the Gloucester School District. So anyway, and I thought that was a good article that they put together because sometimes, unless you know that detailed difference, it sounds good, but unless it's going to regular special ed, it isn't quite the same benefits. So.
I read the article in February from, in the WASB talked about today in their noon seminar that got the impression that there's certain members within that leadership piece that understand the dynamics, how it works, but because it sounds good that, oh, we should put it there, that it's kind of they know that it's a lot less dollar obligation and a lot less money. They're just trying to,
Make
give a
themselves
political
look good.
soundbite,
Yeah.
look good, but
Yeah,
not
but
properly.
not actually do anything.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty disgraceful that high cost was intended to be reimbursed up to that 90% threshold, and they underfunded it so much that's now less than 25%.
25% is what the estimate is this year, so, yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing statewide, you probably saw this, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau does updates periodic in terms of what they think revenues, expenses, how the budgets are looking. And although the state is estimated to have even a larger balance at the end of the fiscal year than what they thought in January, there's a question about what revenues will be in 25 through 27. So, they're probably being conservative in those predictions, but I know when the process goes forward with the state budget, this kind of data becomes pretty important as they start looking at funding different programs. So that was the latest that came out from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau. At this point, there isn't a lot more to share in terms of the state budget. I think as we get into June is likely to be a very, very active month. And I think being aware of what's being proposed and where that's going, we certainly will keep our eyes on that. The federal budget, I don't have anything to share. We haven't already talked about, and I don't think anyone really knows any more information. So anyway, just wanted to share kind of a quick update on that. And at this point, I think let's just move into the building level pieces, and we could start with the middle school and Mr. McBurney.
All right, thank you for having us here to talk a little bit about middle school. I'm going to interrupt at any point for your questions. There's a lot of slides. I'll try to keep the words shorter. So we wanted to make it more visual to you. So as we started in this process, we're just taking a look at, how do we balance the fiscal needs with the needs of instruction at the middle school, and then going forward on this timeline, going back to the referendum in November, and then taking a look at where there is room to reduce in certain areas in terms of staffing, programming, things like that. We obviously met in January and went over different scenarios, had meetings with the whole staff and groups in February and March, and then concluded in April with meeting with everybody individually just to get their feedback on different things we had talked about, ideas and so forth. So as a starting point, I want to just kind of give a little background on what our schedule is right now before we move into the other items. So we're on a 7-period day with a flexible period in the middle. In those 5 periods, our teachers currently teach 5 classes, and then they have a collaborative period, which I'll talk about in a minute, and they have a preparatory period as well. I think big to our discussion tonight is the concept of the teams at the middle school. So this is my version of the sticky notes. So we have the gold team, the trailblazer team. You'll notice that there's an allied arts teacher associated with each of those teams. As we move into the 7th and 8th grade teams, our allied arts teachers teach both 7th and 8th grade students, and they don't teach it by team. That's because about 5 years ago, we increased the offerings that we had in allied arts, so we give kids a little bit of voice and choice in that process. So they will still attend collaborative meetings, but they're not directly associated with a specific team at that grade level. So, as I was sharing before, we have that collaborative period, which is when we talk about middle school and middle school concept, is really kind of at the core of that. So that's where our teachers will come together as a team to talk about the academic, behavioral, social needs of the students, at a very interesting period of their lives, right? So never says, God, I just love the middle school, right? That's never what you get. They also meet with their PLC partner, so that would be like the English teacher on the gold team meeting with the English teacher on the trailblazer team, because since we split the grade levels and those teams don't really interact, one of our core principles is that like the students, regardless of team, are getting a high quality experience that is not the same because the people are different, but it's guaranteeing certain things. So they take that time to meet together there as well. Our co-plank will serve teams meet during that time to our special education staff, intervention staff to talk about specific needs of specific learners as well. And then we also have our, this kind of connects to our flexible period too, because a lot of the work that gets done in there will get done during our winter time as well. So throughout the whole process, our priorities emerged as like teaming is important for us, for our staff, and for our students. Limiting preps, which is not prep time, but like classes that staff prep for. So right now, our core teachers prep for a core area at a grade level. So the English teacher in 6th grade just teaches English in 6th grade. Expertise in that area, consistency through the years, consistency across teams was important. We have other areas like our allied arts where they do and our math teachers where they do prep for multiple courses of data. Meeting our school-wide goals was very important. Maintaining our ability to support our kind of highest needs students, whether it's special education, our EL students, or part of the LTI process was big for us. And then as well, maintaining the opportunities that are exploratory, to the middle school band, choir, and our other allied arts programs. So again, our goals are that we want all students to reach grade level proficiency in reading. We want all students to reach their growth goals and have all of them, have their social and emotional needs met. Some other things we looked at in the process was like, well, kind of where do we stack up against other schools in terms of our instruction and our instructional minutes? We're currently on a 50-minute period. This is ELA minutes in 30 schools from the general southeastern state. And you can see that we have kind of the lowest amount of minutes at this point. And you'll find the same again in math, whereas most schools have switched to blocking both of those spots. Other things that we looked at as part of this process of determining the priorities is, well, where do we stand, right? And at least from we're hovering right around this kind of state average in terms of achievement when it comes to English language arts and mathematics, and we have work to do in the growth area. And this again kind of further touches on that growth goal where it's like there's a little shaded boxes, and we definitely want to be above this line. And in some areas we are, in other areas we're hovering right around that line that we want to get above.
Above that line is high achievement, high growth. That's where you want to be in that upper right quadrant.
Okay, so going through the process, we took, kind of as a starting points and looked at, three different options. So we had the 7-period day, which would mean some pretty significant changes to the current day. We went to the 5-period day as well, and the 6-period day. This is kind of the continuum as we see it, right? Like what we would consider the middle school model in the very traditional sense would be more like what we currently have. I think the 5-period day is a little bit more in the middle, and the 6-period day would be the one that is the most more like the junior high, right? So I'll go into detail a little bit more about those without trying to details. So again, 7-period day, we already went over that. That's slide before. That's what it looks like.
That's what we're
currently doing. So that like the timing of it would remain the same, 50-minute periods, we still have the minute period. This was the current teaming. So in maintaining things how they are and then going through the attrition process, I want to show you kind of what that looks like. So as we move to the next slide, this is what our teams kind of end up becoming. So I went left to right by subject area. This is not an indication of anything. So for instance, our ELA teacher on the golf team is, it takes a position somewhere else, retires, whatever, right? So now I need to take the ELA teacher from the Explorers team, the Patriots team, Fusion, and Monarch team, and I need to shift them over to teach one of the ELA classes that had been vacated by that person through an attrition model. Also, and that only covers 4 of them. I've got one extra one, so I've got an allied art teacher or an elective teacher who's got to fill in that 5th spot, which then means that this team grows from the 4 core teachers to now 9 teachers there. What it also does within that, and that happens again in the areas of math, science, social studies as we get through where we kind of reach our critical mass, where we can't fill in any more holes. So it puts these teams up at about 10 people. The side effects to that are, I talked about those collaborative periods. So now that this ELA teacher is filling in over there, and so is this one, they can no longer meet during that collaborative period. And this team as a whole can never meet now too. So it takes that concept of teaming, which is same kids, same adults, same goals, and it just really kind of falls apart at that point. So the structure is there, but the people aren't actually able to make it into those opportunities. And from kind of a more student perspective, would stay the same if that was the route that we go. The teacher perspective is a little bit different. They've got that extra class in there, which accounts for not being able to get into those other meetings. And then we've also got the study hall potential supervision there too, which probably breaks down to like once a week, basically, too.
Where's social studies?
Oh, it's
Not there.
probably should have been in one of those. That's just an error on my part.
Okay.
And not Freudian or anything like that. I wasn't the English teacher though. So 6-period day, a little bit longer classes, about an hour, like maintain our win time, which we like for additional supports and other things that we have to do, which is pretty consistent with the middle school model. So a lot of people refer to it as like an advisory, but it's very similar to how we use it. This slide is kind of like what teams could kind of be in a 6-period day, but I guess what you'll notice again too is people kind of all over the board. So, and then this box here is blocking it, but it would basically show you is that like this last team almost kind of doesn't even exist because it's just made up of other people filling in those spots. So in actuality, the 6-period day would really more look like this, as everyone's organized by department, no team whatsoever. It's just great. That would give us the most bang for our buck and our ability to collaborate, because we just there wouldn't be space from a teaming concept for it to work.
So this model eliminates 3 or 4.
It's 4, sorry, it's just blocked by
Okay,
this box, that's
and the previous one eliminated 4
4,
as well.
it's 4 as well,
Okay.
yeah, so. So, from a student perspective, in that 6-period day, all of the core classes, social studies is there. Band, still the ability to take band and choir, allied arts are there. This one's a little bit more tricky. I guess if you just think of it as like, every class is a box that has to be covered by a certain amount of adults in a certain period of the day, like band and choir have to run separately in this model, which then for kids that are in both of those, then it's going to remove some other allied arts choices. So that was certainly a negative to this one. From a staff perspective, there's 6 hours, they're teach 5 to 6. There's that PLC/prep time, which is kind of combined there. They're going to be meeting with members of the same department. So again, that's, let's say, an English teacher, and so that they can't meet by team, it just doesn't work, but they are going to meet by department. They have to, because as I mentioned earlier about those like teachers on each team, like the English teacher on each team being consistent and giving the same experiences. We've now got staff who are teaching multiple grade levels the same period of the day. So it has to be all the English teachers off at this time because they all need to collaborate together because they're teaching multiple grade levels. The other one was a 5-period schedule. So it is longer classes. It still has our win time. It doesn't make lunch any longer for kids, which is the number one question I get from them. So, sorry guys. But from a teaming perspective, it keeps things way cleaner than the other model. What you probably noticed right away though are some blank spaces in here. So this is what the teaming would look like for the first trimester, for example. When we get to the second trimester, probably these social studies people move over and fill these boxes, leaving just science, math, and English there. The reason for that is with the class length increasing, we move science and social studies down to 2 of the 3 trimesters for the school year. You know, kind of thinking back to instructional minutes and our performance, we kept math as all 3 trimesters for the year, which I increased it by about over 3,000 minutes in those areas, but only about a 600-ish minute difference in science and social studies. Now, teaching it 2/3 of the year is very different than teaching it the full year, even though the classes are longer. So I'm not saying that we don't have to, there wouldn't be some shrinking that is involved in there in terms of material and stuff like that. It does offer other opportunities in terms of, collaborating and having a time for that, individually meeting with students, but I just can get into that. Yep.
The minutes, what was the total length of the period for this 5-hour? Did you say?
Well, Mr. Keel and I have to figure that out, but, so 70-ish.
Okay,
Yeah.
can you go back to that original chart that had the comparables
Yep.
of all the other schools? I just want to see. So yeah, I think that lands us about in the middle
Yep.
range or closer to the average range. And I think one of the concerns that we have when we look at the ELA and the mathematical achievement standpoint, in particular that growth, we see the students coming in the middle school at a decent achievement level. I think they made some great headway on, picking up and they're seeing progress in that growth piece, but just from a time and a minute standpoint, it's at a large differential compared to speaking to other middle schools in which, when they're looking at the state average in that comparison piece, that's what they're being compared to. And so I do think every, regardless, I think that's a critical component, which is completely separate from the referendum and the need for attrition from the staffing, is that we need to look at a different schedule model of the middle school anyway to increase that mathematic and ELA time comparatively speaking.
And I guess I wouldn't blame me if you had a question like why, how do they do that versus, it's a different schedule and it comes down to they offer less, arts choices than we do.
Okay.
We've strived to give those opportunities to kids and certainly ones that align perfectly to the experiences that they're gonna have at the high school. So that's how it ends up like that.
Do we have any other Walworth County schools in there, in that comparison? I see school district,
No, like, I mean, there's Mcquanago right across the border, Burlington,
Burlington.
Waterford.
but not in Walworth County.
I think if we look at the other Walworth counties, so their schedules aren't that different than ours, but their school report cards in the middle schools are also similarly low, yeah,
Oh.
school report card. So I think when you look at these are some of the highest performing
I see.
middle schools in the state.
Okay,
As
so that's
well,
what
which happen to be
that's
in
what
our
we're
region.
comparing ourselves to, is to the higher.
Well, and this would be like a part of a group that I'm involved in too, where and we extend it to everybody, but I only have it in the background, that was what's.
Yep. Yeah.
Here. Okay, so like I said, there was a 5-period day. These kind of blank spaces do shift. So there is, from a ELA math perspective, they'd be like works on those teams. They're on that team. They're always on that team. Whereas the science and social studies shifting, but by the trimester, not within the course of the day. Right? So there's some consistency amongst the flexibility there. From a student perspective, less transitions than what we currently have, another less transition that we have with the 6th period potential. And again, maintaining those allied arts options. Originally, when we kind of were diving into this too, we're taking a look at the band choir concern, because that's something that our students and families and myself have, maintaining that opportunity. Our band choir people have made great in their flexibility, so we think we can run it at the same time and more of an every other day perspective, because we have about 30-some students in the middle school that are involved. So it's not an insignificant number, but it's so wanting that opportunity there for them too, which gained back some allied arts, which we thought they were going to have to lose within any kind of shifting. So
this model allows for the maximum ability to do allied arts. Correct?
for a
For a
band choir student, yes, it's the same. It's an increase in one allied arts over what we currently have for a non-band choir student.
Okay.
So it's one extra allied.
Could it be modeled so that because not obviously we have about 30 kids who do both band and choir. Could it be modeled so that, of course, band has to probably meet at the same time every day, right? It's not like you're gonna have three different
Yeah,
sessions
so
of band.
one band per grade level.
Yeah, okay,
Which, sorry, that's not entirely true. Our 6th grade has 2 different sections usually to start the year,
Okay.
and then they combine. We
Okay.
have such a variety of talents.
got it,
Yes.
okay, no, then that.
So, yeah, and it's so like within only the 5 periods, right? So there's band, this
Yeah.
is pretend band 6, band 7, band 8. There's could run 2 at each level. We run it,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
So from a staff perspective, it's the 4 of the 5 classes. There's still at one time, there's that team/PLC time in there. And again, more consistency than we had in the 6th period day, or sticking with kind of the current schedule. So, cost savings.
I'm excited about the fish on there. I'm waiting for the reaction. Plus,
The fish. You want to keep the fish?
No, that's plus.
We're gifting them the fish.
Got it.
So the percentages here is kind of like in reference to like going to of the model and how much instructional time that the teacher has during the day. Okay, so like currently,
Yep.
teaching 71% of the day, 5 period, be up to 80, a little bit higher than 83 in the 6th period. So this number is a little bit shy of what we talked about before, but that came out of taking Avid out of the reduction process and maintaining that opportunity. And then the 7 period number, you see obviously that's significantly less. If you break it down by, losing some positions to attrition, like the number starts to get much bigger, but if we go all the way back, right here, what we then though have is this person slides over to cover that extra class and you have an overload cost
Right.
for the whole year, things like that. So there's a plus and minus before getting to that final number there. So I guess the other things to share, kind of from our one-on-one meetings, I think staff by and large, we need to do what's best for the students, right? And then we determine what that is, then we make it work for the adults, and they're the ones that work directly with the students, right? So maintaining those opportunities for our kids. So finding a way to try and do it unlike other schools which have ACTS, allied arts, fine arts types programs, maintaining that stuff. And lastly, that we could be flexible. We had some other things that we talked about, which are just more than bigger picture stuff. Concerns, and I guess I would define concerns here as areas that there wasn't consensus upon, right? Like, it didn't exactly break down this, but a third of staff was like, we'll do whatever, we'll make it work. Right? Another third felt strongly one way about it, and another third felt strongly the other way about it. Which is like, we have 60 plus staff members, right? So, class length, people seeing the benefits to being able to go deeper, more individual small group work, people having concerns about tension, things like that. Teaching the multiple grade levels, and then that was something that our allied arts people were like, yeah, whatever, we are very do it, like no big deal. Math teachers, same thing, other people, and I don't think certainly not from a work ethic standpoint, but it's like just passionate about what they do right now and feeling really good about it and wanting to give kids the best that they have. And then maintaining teaming was, obviously the other big one. So as we talked about the schedules, again, the largest portion of our staff is like, we can be flexible, we can do whatever. More people had preferred the 5 period day over the 6th period day, and the conversations with them. Some of these I would consider kind of like votes that didn't actually vote, right? Either, this is just a conversation we've had with, I liked this, but I liked this too, kind of thing. That's about the breakdown of that. So I guess just kind of in sum, looking at this is what the 7th period day would actually kind of look like before we're at a point where like positions must be refilled. Feel like we lose. We keep pretty much in name only what we're looking to get out of the schedule. I think within the 6th period day, it's the most like a junior high out of the options. So I think the 5 period day offers us the best of maintaining what's most important to us in terms of the teaming and the consistency, and in a period of what could be a lot of change next year, it keeps people kind of focused at least by trimester on one grade level, one course at a time.
And this allows for the teachers as well to meet as a team
Correct.
and
Yep.
teach as a team.
Correct.
And so maintains kind of a middle, more of a middle school model, it sounds like.
So
And-
it does
and-
change, like I said,
Of course.
the trimester, these
Yep.
teachers are gonna shift over, they're gonna be a
This
part of a
is
new team.
Much more like the high school,
Yeah,
in that-
more similar in that.
more similar in at least a couple of the.
I think that what we're able to do by going, especially with the 3 trimesters of ELA and math though, is that, but we still have that, we're not gonna get a new English teacher.
Right.
Right, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So whereas you could have that at the high school.
Yes,
you know,
I get that.
You're increasing your instructional time in
Yeah.
ELA and math by, is it close to 25%?
Which is,
And those are areas that we're not forming as well as we could.
what are the allied arts offerings? Foreign language?
Yeah, so we have Spanish and German and art and tech ed, and I kind of put those in one category because they'll have their 6th grade offering and then they'll have a level 1 and a level 2 offering for later. And that doesn't have to be 7th and 8th grade. There's multiple pathways to experience that. And then we have Mr. Drury and Mr. Hudson, and they do it a little bit differently. Mrs. Drury has computers in 6th grade, and then she will have a computer class and a business class that she teaches. And then Mr. Hudson does robotics in 6th grade, and then smattering of agriculture. And then we'll have 2 separate courses, he teaches robotics and he teaches agriculture.
And we'd be able to maintain all of that.
In fact, depending on how things go, I'd kind of like to have one more offering for the probably can make it different. Like what?
Yeah, what are you thinking?
Well, I think it would be probably something that we currently have, right? So we've got a business, it could be multiple businesses, the same as over robotics, agriculture, and computers, or we have also the very, very upgraded background at the middle school as well to
Yep.
do some awesome grant work by teams in the district. That it's an amazing space and they really knows what they're doing on all the different things up there. So
Yeah.
that's.
But we would have teachers to teach them whatever you decide to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not having, we're not going, we're going to go off the market.
Yeah.
Through the attrition, right? There it is. You know, made sense.
Any questions? That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, super important.
Doing that.
Great sticky notes.
And the fish.
And because you well planned.
My slides are quite as pretty as his.
Well, high school didn't have the same box system.
Before we go to the high school model, maybe is there more discussion around that middle school piece and what you would like to see administration move forward on in regards to the structure? Or do you want to see the high school presentation when we discuss that? Or instead of, it would be good to discuss it while it's fresh in everyone's mind.
Sure. let's do that.
Well, the 5-period day saves us the least amount of money.
No.
No, the 7-period
The
days
7-period
is,
days.
Oh, it's the 7. Okay.
and
The 5
seems to
was-
have the most
Okay.
disruption.
Dan, can you go to the fish slide?
5, 6, 7.
The fish.
The fish slide. Scroll up.
Okay, I'll do.
Let them drive.
I'll go back home.
There we go.
I know having taught middle school and high school and having taught on the block schedule and transition from a traditional 8-hour day to a block schedule, it is a transition when you go to that longer period day. And, best practices within that class period, you need to have transitions to different type of activities typically. But what I really liked about it is I found from a student standpoint, especially when you're dealing with young adolescents or middle school students, asking them to keep track of 7 different courses, homework, and or the projects for that, being able to narrow that focus to now I have, you take out the allied arts, they're dealing with 4 courses a day. That it really, I think there's a lot of benefit to that, and being able to go deep and some of that hands-on, they're sometimes more conducive, even though the class period is longer, it can be more conducive to the instructional style that is beneficial to the kids. So myself as, having taught at that level in the past and having taught in that block, I would never want to teach anything other than that longer period block schedule. I would never want to go back to it, but that's just me personally. I know not all feel that way, but I really enjoyed it. And that was being a world English teacher, which I would say sometimes that's atypical because sometimes your world language teachers, and I don't know how Kyle feels about it, sometimes they're not the biggest fans of block type schedule. For different reasons, but I really love it. So, what was,
I wrote my master's thesis on the foreign language and block schedule. I found that it was very beneficial. But one thing that the longer period, it allows teachers, especially with science, it allows them to do a project and complete it. And it allows for group collaboration. Any teacher that is going to lecture for 70 minutes, we shouldn't have to begin with.
At the middle school.
At the high school.
13-year-olds.
At the high
Yeah,
school,
or,
too.
well, true, so. It's 12 years.
and from the teacher's standpoint, currently they're teaching 6 out of 8. You're teaching 4 out of 5. And that's 2 less rotations, 2 less class, so while the period's longer, it's less prep, it's less set on for a say. I guess it's a much more delightful.
Yeah, I really like it. I love the 5 day.
I'm in favor as well.
Yeah, I'm just asking unfair questions. Is there any negative to share or talk about this? So, not that I don't see one, but
Concerns about bullying and attention span. That came in at the tail end of transition to the longer days at the high school. We talked about the state changes every 20 minutes and making sure that the kids active and they're not doing the same thing all the time. Like Mr. Chadlock, I taught middle school in a block, so you'll remember 100 minutes. Sixth graders at the end of the day. So there's some that I would say that was probably the biggest concern that came up related to the longer class period.
And it looks like if you back up a couple slides, wasn't it that in that 5-period schedule, wasn't the math and ELA at the end of the day? I mean, or is that just it's just, okay.
Somebody will have.
Yeah, somebody will,
Right.
So,
but it won't be everybody.
it won't be. So there's some opportunity to whether it's at the term or the trimester to do some rotating too, like what is currently first hour becomes second hour. The second hour becomes third hour, so that it's not always same kids, same time of day, just to space some of what you're talking about.
Honestly, we need to develop longer attention spans. So I think it might take a while for the kids to get used to it, but developing longer attention spans is not a bad thing.
And I've always been concerned about us providing the 8th graders an opportunity to
Yes.
experience what the high school is like before they get to the high school.
Yes.
Because there's true fear in an eighth grader going to the high school.
Yeah.
And going this way, I mean, they're used to a period that, hey,
I think on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's familiarity with blocks times too, coming from elementary school in
Sure.
terms of how much time they spend in their reading and math blocks as well. Everyone, not super familiar, no one speaks to that, but I think that's
It's
pretty
had some
accurate.
exposure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Play
So-
devil's, sorry.
Yeah.
To play devil's advocate, I would argue that if we ever had a block period and associate principal for middle school, and we were trying to ever go back to like a 7-period day, I imagine that the main discussion here would probably be heavily around, we are transitioning so much in the middle school, we're losing instructional time. And so
Yeah.
I think when you look at it inversely, there would be a lot of fear. I know there's always traditional fear of like, hey, we're having more time in the classroom. There will be transitions, but those are academic transitions inside the classroom that are more facilitated. Most of the issues at the middle school are usually in transition when kids are moving around the school
Yes.
heavily. It takes a considerable amount of time for kids to get settled in, Chromebooks out, get ready. It's usually the number one complaints we get from teachers about like, hey, we've lost so much instructional time. There's many other complaints, but this is academically, they're like, we want to get more instructional time in. Kids always want to pack up early, kind of doing that type of thing. And obviously classroom management will be paramount with this, and there'll have to be some professional development to build those skills for people that haven't had a block period. I've also taught in a block period, and I loved it, and the kids adapt relatively quickly. Because the engagement goes up and you're not looking at a clock so much to be like, when's the next period coming? You're more engaged in the academics. And I came from a school previously in the district that didn't have clocks on the wall. And it was amazing how quickly students stopped looking at that and just focus on the academics when you know that you're in the classroom, there to learn. And again, attention span is a major thing. And so constant transitions of uprooting kids, moving them to a different part of the building, having them settle down after something. It is very disruptive at
Yeah,
times.
it makes a lot of
It's
sense.
true, you instantly reduce the behavior referrals and transition time
Sure.
by 25%.
Wow. Wow, that's.
That's what I was just gonna
You
add.
saw that
That's what I was
in
just gonna
high
add
school?
when Dan, Sarah, myself,
Yeah.
Eric Gordon, when we were in front of the board recommending the 5-period day at the high school, we sat right in front and said, we will see, the research says you will see a significant decline in behavioral referrals, an increase in attendance. And I'm sure Dan will touch on this, but Kyle can speak to this. The first week we went to the trimester, you could feel the building go, like literally, like it was just because you didn't have that bell going off every 45, 50 minutes. So you saw, and I know
Over lunch, it was every 20 minutes or 23 minutes.
Yep. I mean, and so you just saw the tempo slow down and behavior referrals changed and attendance went up.
Like it?
So I'm hearing kind of the consensus, go ahead and move forward with the 5-hour day.
The 5-period day seems to make more sense.
I think.
I do.
That's all.
Yes.
in agreement.
This, or just because we didn't touch on it, or one of the concerns, how do these science and social studies teachers, should we anticipate some concern or, I don't
That they
necessarily want
don't
to
get
say
as much
complaints,
instructional
but,
time,
right, because there are just 2 out of the 3 trimesters.
but they're still getting more than they have now, right?
From a time perspective?
Yes.
No, it's a little bit less, about
Less.
600 minutes. So a couple of,
It's more time in the period, but they're only meeting 2 out of the 3.
Right.
Masters, right.
Yeah, so that will have to be, we'll have to make some adjustments and, you know, because we're not gonna try to cover the exact amount, but 600 minutes comes out to, that's about 60 hours plus.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, so in our current schedule, it was, what, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So,
That
so
would be a
the,
one drop.
the natural attrition, like in the 6-period day was really more, equitable, right, one for each department, we made 5 period days, looking more at the science and the social studies departments, and we maintain the ELA classes. I think in the end, there's like, that we have to do something to get something kind of to
Is
make
there-
the best out of it.
Is there a way to incorporate? Because it would be science and social studies, right?
Mhm.
I just was thinking, you said you needed an extra course for your.
Yeah, that's where I was going to
Wondering if
say.
there is a way to incorporate.
We incorporate the Fab Lab,
The Fab
the
Lab
after-school
or-
clubs, and so, and that's what we've done with some of our project leads that we
Mhm.
can't fit in the core curriculum, that we offer them as after-school STEM offerings and or during summer school.
Right,
And, or if we have to shift someone over to, make use of the Fab, which is all spring related as well.
yeah,
We certainly
so
do that.
maybe
Yeah.
something can be incorporated into the.
And we do have rich STEM offerings in our allied arts, which a lot of middle schools don't have, with the
Right.
robotics and the agricultural science and
Right,
the tech ed. Which is good. And I think everybody knows I'm a huge science proponent, STEM proponent, but the need to increase the math and the ELA minutes, we're
Yeah.
just too upside down on that.
yeah, we are,
And I remember my superintendent, New Glarus, she would tell me, Jason, kids can't read and they can't do math, how are they gonna do science?
correct,
And, how are they gonna be well prepared for that high school level and that higher level science, or
yep.
science? So
I guess, it doesn't change the impact for us too, because we're not just, we're talking about not just the positions, but we know the people too, right? So it's more personal to us,
Yeah,
but from a more comparison standpoint, it's like we're at 15 minutes, you pretend we're going to go, that I'm guessing it's probably 80 something in there. So how they account for that is like, you're in a blocked ELA class, some kids are in that. Another group of kids split between science and social studies, and we're called a STEAM. So the science and social studies in that setting literally meets for half the time
yeah,
that English and math meets. So we're above that,
yeah.
from a comparative standpoint.
they just wanted to point that
Yeah,
out, because we
no,
haven't
that's-
discussed it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, it's fresh.
I assume the same thing's gonna happen at the middle school, during the 5 period day that it came to the high school, is that the curriculum is going to change in the sense that you can't teach as much as you used to be able to teach, and you're gonna have to decide what's important and what to give up.
Mhm.
Yeah, I assume that's gonna happen.
Yes.
That will definitely have to happen. for science
Yeah.
and social studies.
Yeah,
But, I mean, then you concentrate on what's important.
What's most important, and especially in that area of science though, so as the class length increases, that allied arts class length increases too. So we're talking about if there is something in science that
Yeah.
is on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
We've also recaptured time in this other area, which you can be placed into, which is similar to what Jason was talking about with the PLTW units already being present in our allied arts course.
yeah.
So.
All right. Thanks, Dan, for deferring. I just want to make sure we had that discussion that was fresh.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
You're welcome, man. I would echo though, as a former science teacher, if I had to choose kids that were strong in reading and strong in math, what do they struggle with? They don't know the vocabulary, they can't learn the vocabulary, they can't do that.
Yep.
So it might seem like it's gonna be a hit, but I don't think that once they get to the high school level, if they can read and they can do that, it's gonna be a benefit. So, similar, how do we align student course requests with current staffing model? Make staffing decisions that are responsive to student needs, but responsible to the district. We're in a little different position in that years ago, we identified basically that we had an inefficient schedule. We went, so we had the benefit though of taking a year to just, I was on the committee. We went through and we experimented with different schedules, we looked at different schedules, we sent people to different schools. We came up with the trimester pretty much unanimously within 2 separate committees. And then we had a year plan. So it's a little time crunch for the middle school, but you know, Ryan was in on, Sarah was in on, and so I think there's definitely some experience there with it. So just some history on it, because kind of Julia, you may have been on the board for this, but I don't think anybody else was. Kyle lived it, so he jumped in, please. What is it? We real quickly, 3 12-minute blocks. We were at 2 18 minutes on or 18-week blocks on a semester. Currently, we're at 5 periods, 69 minutes. When we originally went to the trimester, it was 70. Things have shifted around a little bit. Kids get final grades after each trimester. Teachers teach 4 out of 5, which is at 80% efficiency, which one of the things that we looked at, we had to have a more efficient schedule. We were at 6 out of 8. Some teachers were teaching 5 out of 8 in 2 study halls. I think we figured it out at one point, we were spending $1.5 million on study halls.
Yep.
And so going to that 4 out of 5, we had to put more teachers in classrooms. Kids still get a study hall, but the way we do it, we do hours 1, 2, 3, and then we do 2 lunches. So you're either in lunch, if you're a freshman, sophomore, you meet first. Juniors and seniors are in study hall with teachers who primarily are teaching junior, senior classes, so they have access to those teachers. There's a 5-minute flip. And then juniors and seniors come down and meet, freshmen and sophomores go to study hall. So the old model, we had 4th, 5th, and 6th hour broken up by lunch periods. They were 46-minute lunch periods. So we gained 16 minutes right off the end. What a pain in the butt. Freshman and the freshman sophomore lunch is my favorite battle of the day. And then they go to junior senior lunch, they just chill. It's amazing. But so when we did that, we grabbed 16 minutes just off of lunch, 16 minutes a day. And teachers actually voted to have things end on 0s and 5s, and actually voted to go 5 extra minutes in the day. So, and I think we were pretty much unanimous on the trimester when we did it. But the beauty of it is that we're done with lunches in 65 minutes, and there's no instructional time during that. It's all either your lunch or your study hall. There's band lessons and choir lessons. We don't give them duties over lunch. But it works out well for us. The semester classes meet for 1 trimester, while year-long classes are going to meet for 2. So kids do have classes, like you may have an English class, you may have the first half in the first trimester, the second half in the 3rd trimester, or 2nd and 3rd, or 1st and 2nd. But it's worked out, I think, pretty well for us. I don't think there's too many people that would say, hey, let's go back to the 8 period, 46 minutes. And that was, when you talked about the building level going down and the discipline referrals going down, we increased our passing time by 5 minutes. So it was a 3-minute passing time, which is too short for that size of the building. And it was just every 44 minutes, over lunches, and those are going all the time. It definitely slows your building down, and you do regain at the beginning and end of every period, for sure. So benefits, similar to what Ryan was talking about, greater depth of teaching and learning, less classes for students and teachers at any given time. So kids got 5 classes instead of, they were in the old model, they were either taking 1 study hall or 2. There were some that took all 8, but most either took 1 study hall and some had 2, which is way too much.
Better kids were taking as many classes as possible, having those studies.
Yeah, some were taking 8. Lower teacher to student ratio at any given time, not throughout the year, but at any given time in the year, since you're switching 3 times. AP classes, most of our AP classes we're running in try 1 and try 2. So they get through the whole AP class and the whole AP curriculum prior to AP testing, which in a semester class, you go until June, AP testing is 1st week of May. So they're not getting through the whole course. Less lost time due to passing between classes, 3 student schedule changes, and that's kind of big. I mean, 18 weeks is a long time. You know, we can sit with kids, I hate this class, I hate this class, hey, you got 6 weeks left, you can do anything, you know? And I think that 12-week and then a switch, it does, especially in the springtime, when it's really gets long, we get that switch in March, and it just kind of freshens everything up a little bit.
Gives everybody a reset to get through the rest of the year.
Yep. Immediate remediation for students in need. At times, you know, if the kid fails English, you have to have 4 credits of English to graduate. Kid fails English in trimester 1, we can put them right back into the same class in trimester 2, keep it on that grade level. They'll lose an elective, but you're gonna lose something if you fail. Teachers are teaching classes versus supervised study halls, which is something that we felt was very important at the time. You know, we were not getting our bang for our buck with PLTs, they were called.
Yes.
And then we had structured PLTs.
I don't know if you keep records on this, but I was just wondering about number 8. If we noticed the number of kids that don't graduate because they have an opportunity to make up a failed class.
Almost nobody doesn't graduate. I mean, literally with our district, if they're struggling at the high school, there's a program for everybody. You almost have to try not to graduate, you know, with all the programs we have. So I think it wouldn't be apples to apples because of the different programs we offer now that we didn't offer then.
No, that's true.
But within the high school, you know, we have a few kids right now that are, I gotta come in tomorrow. Today was seniors last day. They gotta come in tomorrow. Something up, but it's a handful. It's literally a handful.
So the graduation rate, when you look and see, so in our mind, it's like, well, what do you mean? We got all of our kids to graduate. But the way they report the data is, for example, our students that are continuing on until age 21, it's did you graduate with your cohort? And so if there's special needs and they're continuing special education services in that program, that's going to not show, you'll show up as a non-graduation. It's not a dropout. Once in a while, we'll have a student who floats in from out of town to the county jail for whatever reason, and we provide services to them, and then they get out of jail. Here's because we're the county seats, they become a student of record for us, even if they then disappear and we're the last site. That doesn't, actually, we got that, we did get legislation changed on that. So I stand corrected, that doesn't count. I lobbied for that a few years ago and they passed that. But really it's that age 21, we have so many programs and modalities that it does happen from time to time, but it's rare that we have that where people think of that high school dropout where they just stop going because I'm a teen now, I'll see you later.
Well, when we were on the semester system, it seemed like we had about 15% that didn't graduate. And I'm assuming we're nowhere near that.
The kids that literally all of the seniors that are at the high school right now, they're not going to graduate. We do have some going through 21s and special needs students that are going to go to the transition program, which is great for them. What they need, if it counts against us a little bit, well, it's definitely what the kids, that's all it is. When you get to minutes of instruction, these are old numbers because we've adjusted our number of days, we've adjusted a lot, but at the time, 155 days is what we had prior to AP testing. And we had 46 minutes a day, so 7,130 minutes of instruction. We went to 120 days, it's not that anymore, it's less than that because we've cut some days, but times 70, we're at 8,400, it's 5.5 weeks of instruction prior to AP, which was really significant. The downside is we have a gap now from March until May when they take the test. So we do boosts a little.
Right.
And, some kids come, some kids don't. The kids that go do better, shockingly. They're not mandatory because they're after school and teachers are scheduling them around all the different things that kids are doing. So, when we look at how do we determine what classes are going to run, what's our staffing model? Nothing's changed there. The difference is when you get to high school, is you have content specialists. When you're in middle school and elementary, there are a lot of 1-8 certifications. They can teach anything 1 through 8. High school is either going to be 7-12, 9-12, and they're content specialists. So, say Kyle, you're a German teacher, I need somebody in Spanish. That's not fair, English to physics, they can't bounce quite as easily. And some do, some have the ability to, but you know, we encourage our kids, we really push making the most of high school, make your choices based on what's right for you and your interests and what your pathway is gonna be. We spend a lot of time with our kids in SSD, 3 days, we have 30-minute period every week where kids, they work on academic career planning and other things, but a good chunk of what they do is they're figuring out, what do I like? What do we have here that I can use to get me to my next step, you know, whatever that may be. So they do explore the course guide. Once they do that, they make their requests. Our schedule is based completely on student requests. So, you know, sometimes people ask, you know, why don't you have more kids taking this? I don't know, because they're choosing something else, you know, and why do we have so many tech ed teachers? Because they're providing things that the kids want. And, you know, that's, you build it, you do something that they want, they'll come. And you need more teachers there. When you need more teachers here, some probably dropped off other places. So our every time, since I've been here for 12 years, every time a staff member leaves, we look at, can we do this without them? And sometimes we can, and then we do, but a lot of times then it's, but I need somebody else here because those requests went somewhere, you know? But the process we go through, just to give you an example, I'll give you a few examples because they're a little different depending on subject area. I'm technical. All right, so this is our tech ed, this is our tech ed department. So these are the classes that we run. Okay, it doesn't matter what the classes are, but these are the classes we run. Roughly, we have an auto area, we have a welding area, we have a machining area, we have a building construction area with type classes. And we have small engines, and we have consumer autos, we have some of the other classes that's tied in. So those teachers, you know, if I told one teacher, hey, you're gonna teach your auto class, that's not my specialty, I'm a welder, or, you know, I do woodworking and construction. So they are kind of siloed a little bit. We can do some crossover, but to be honest, I told most people to walk into Mike Thomas's machine shop and said, yeah, good luck, you know. I mean, it's a very specialty area that he spent 25 years in industry learning. And I hope he never leaves before I do. I don't know how we replace some of these people, you know. But what we do is, this is kind of the magic number over here. This is requests. So requests for 25, 26. All right, so those are how many kids requested that course this year. And then what I have is, I have a history that goes back as long as I've been here. So it's 2013, 2014. I'm sure I could dig up numbers. A lot of classes have changed since then. But what you do is you look at how many students were requested and then how many students actually were enrolled in the class.
Okay.
All right, because that allows you to make good decisions. And you can see for whatever reason that bumped up 10, dropped. So we're at 58. Our max for consumer autos is 20. Right? So it's a lab class. They're going to be working on cars and lifts and things like that. 20 is a legit number for that class. All right, so we have 50 requests. So if I just go based on max, that's going to be 3 classes of 16, 17 kids, right? So what we look at is it's probably going to drop. We're going to go 2 for 20 hard. That means 20 is a hard max. That our counselors know you're not putting 21 in there.
Yeah.
Auto tech, similar. You know, 59 kids. Max in there is 18 because they're doing a lot of work on lifts, and Austin's going to be running around like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to, you know, make sure everybody's being safe and getting what they want, getting what they need. So he's agreed we can go 20 as long as 20 is a hard max. So 3 for 20, that covers our 59 requests. But also, it's going to drop. You know, it's not going to be 59. We're going to be closer to that 18 mark.
And part of the reason why these drop is these are the requests before the schedule's put together. So once that schedule's put together, there's going to be conflicts. I'm sorry. Sorry.
No, you're good. But it's always.
We needed that for me.
And the other thing kids are doing is they put in, I think they get to put in all their electives and they put in alternates. So when they can't get what their first choice is, then the counselors will start taking alternates in.
Yeah.
So that would be an example of a tech ed. And then we look at, okay, we have a sim class. Sim's not gonna fit. It doesn't fit in anybody's schedule. There's only 5 kids that signed up for it, so that we're gonna drop that class. We're not gonna run that class this year, which is too bad.
What is
'cause
that
it's-
class? Is that the?
STEM, it's computer integrated manufacturing, so it's like
Oh.
it's like the top machining class.
Okay.
We haven't been able to run it for a few years because it's really a specialty class. Now, if we're in a situation where I had staffing for it, we'd run it. You know, that would be a class you don't like to cut the capstone classes because those are the kids that are putting the time in that end. If they're going that far, that's probably gonna be an interest area for them in the future. But there's other things that we can get them looked into.
They like, kids in that class could go and do the CNC boot camp, that's
There's
a
other things that-
gateway, or they could do a youth apprenticeship
Okay.
and get that
Okay.
experience.
There's other areas that the counselors will try to push them towards when they can't get what they want. This is science department. So typically, our science department's been 8 people, as long as I've been here, been 8. And a lot of, it's not just science, they do a lot of the project legal aid classes too. Which is, when you look at the bottom, all these classes are figured in to science too. A full-time teacher is 12 sections. That's teaching 4 out of 5 in 3 trimesters. So a full-time teacher teaches 12 sections. We have 96 available, which is 8 teachers. So give me an example of, we do it the same exact way. You look at history, you figure out how many sections there are. Once we get the staffing profile to Jason approves it, then we go to the department leaders and we say, here are your section numbers. And they put together a schedule, how they want to see it based on who's licensed, who wants to teach what. They put that together. Kyle did that for years. So that's kind of the process of how we build it. But this year, just for an example, we had a teacher that teaches physics and applied science that resigned. So we went through the same, I didn't think we'd be able to absorb it. But we figured out how to absorb it. And the ways to absorb it at the high school level, you raise class sizes, you offer overloads, or you don't offer classes. That's really the ways that we have to do it. So I'll show you how we did it a little bit later, but we did it with math last year. So we do it when we can. Did it with social studies when John Hamel went to the AD and I'm principal, we absorbed his position. And it's possible, sometimes it causes a little stress, and in this case, it's gonna cause a little stress because there's people that are gonna have to pick up overloads. If you're teaching 5 out of 5 and don't have a break during the day, that's tough. That's tough. But some people love it. It's Becky Richlife will take every overload I want to. You want me to go over the rest of these? You kind of get the idea of how we do the process. So from the requests, we get the section numbers, we get the staffing profile approved, we give that to the department leaders. They're going to come back with something like this. All right. This is our master schedule for this year. All right. There's a 5th period over here. I could shrink that. There's a 5th period over here. So trimester 1, everybody's gonna be teaching 4 out of 5. If you got an overload, you're gonna be teaching 5 out of 5, and you're not gonna see a yellow prep. Right? So we don't technically have common planning times. The only common planning times that we guarantee teachers or try to guarantee teachers is co-plan, co-serve. So co-plan, co-serve is when our special ed teachers are pushing in to their regular ed classrooms. Typically, it's going to be in your 4 cores, freshman and sophomore regular classes. English, we do push in a little bit to 11. We do push in a little bit to applied math, a little bit to applied science, but mostly in the freshman and sophomore level classes. Hopefully, those kids are learning how to go with them. So what we try to do in the cores is, like I can see here, like these people have the same prep. That's going to be a co-plan, co-serve prep for Bailey and Ellison in biology. They both teach biology classes. So that's the common planning. In that once a week, they're going to get together and meet and discuss their plans. They're gonna have all the specialists in that meeting and administrators in that meeting, and go over what kids are we worried about. How do we make these lessons accessible to all kids? Who's gonna modify what? Who's, it's a needed planning period, and it's good for kids, and it's good to keep the teachers aligned. But most of them do not have a common plan at the time. They're gonna meet outside of the school day during in-services. That's when they meet to plan. That's try one. Try two is gonna look a little different. Try three is gonna look a little different. You'll notice in try two is the tough one, because you have both A's and B's going on. So that's the one where teachers are gonna be teaching multiple preps. So it's not like these guys very seldom are they gonna teach the same thing all day. We try to keep them under 3 preps during the day, where they're teaching 3 different classes. Every once in a while, somebody will get one where they get to teach the same class all day, but they're gonna go bored.
Yeah. It would drive you crazy.
Yeah. But then you get, if you're a Dave Cruz, you might have 5 or 4 different classes that you have to prep for all the time, because you teach a lot of singletons. And, when you look at, so when you get into the master schedule like this, you put this together. When you do this, you can't accommodate all the kids' requests. There's no way you're gonna accommodate all the requests and all the different variations of what each kid wants. So what we're working on it right now, Ellen is, and basically we put it together how the teachers want it. We balance preps. We go through some processes of we know that a lot of our singleton classes, the singleton is where it's only offered once. Those classes, we gotta spread those out, because if you put those in the same hour, those kids aren't gonna obviously be able to take them. And then we have classes that we know we have to have in certain hours because we share a teacher, or different reasons why they have to be in a certain hour. And then from there, you just play with classes until you eliminate conflicts as best you can. You get around 70%, then the counselors do the rest. And the counselors go and they, by hand, will go through and they'll look at a kid's schedule. They'll see what, okay, they couldn't get this, but they had this for an alternate. They'll slide that in. If we get it done before they leave, they talk to the kids and let the kids make some choices. So that's the process that we use. So like when this teacher here is the one that resigned. So when we look at, I didn't think we were gonna be able to cover them, number one, because it's physics. And there's really, I have 2 people that can teach physics, 3 that are licensed, 2 that have ever done it. So we were able to do it by pushing a couple other classes, offering some overloads, raising the class sizes on a couple classes. But what you have to do in order to eliminate this position, I have to get these 4 classes. There's another one over here. In all 3 trimesters, I have to find a new home for those. But that's how you do it. If you do it before we run the schedule, we can do it and we can get things pretty well balanced out. Last year, we had a math teacher leave. We actually interviewed for it, didn't find a candidate that we wanted to hire. So we decided to, in the department, we decided that we cover it with overloads. Anytime after you run the schedule and you do this, there's carnage on kids' schedules, because there's only so much movement once the schedule's been run. Every time you move a class, you're moving those 20 kids.
Oh, yeah, the ripple effect.
And then there's a ripple effect on every one of those. So it becomes hard, but it's manageable. But what happens then is we get overloads, and then class sizes don't get balanced very well. Because you're not gonna move a kid just to move them. You'll move them if they can move them and still get what they want. So it can be done, but it's much preferable if we can do it on the front end versus on the back end. Questions on how we get to the schedule? It's a process.
I'm just curious, what's academic?
What's what?
Academic.
It's an academic study hall.
It's like a structure.
It'd be like a structure. It's like if we know a kid's struggling in math,
Okay.
we have a math study hall. We see that we have 15 kids that are getting D's and F's in chemistry. All right, we're gonna set up a chemistry study hall with a chemistry teacher, put those kids into that study hall to get added support. The hard part is when you get kids that are struggling in 4 classes, where to put them. Then we're gonna go reading and math, like what middle school's doing.
We also have one for organization.
Yep.
That sort of thing.
Yep, the structured study hall is where they're gonna get a lot of avid strategies, and a lot of times it is just organization. And what happens in there is you get a kid in there, you get them turn around, we need another kid to get in there, they don't wanna leave because they just saw the benefit,
Oh, sure.
you know, and they have someone there who's really organizing them.
Yeah.
But it's, that's our system of intervention, you know, we don't have intervention time really built in within the day, we don't have that common preps. But our teachers are willing and able to do it outside. If we can give them a common prep, we do. But, you know, everything you do to the schedule, you know, you can do whatever you want with the master schedule. You can do absolutely anything you want with it. Everything has a chain reaction, and in the end, every adult decision you make that makes it easier for adults usually takes flexibility away from kids. So you really have to balance what you're doing to make it good for the adults versus what does that do to the number of kids that are getting the classes that they want. You know, there's always that balance, and we try to, you know, obviously we prioritize kids, but there are some things that we know if it's important, you put it into the schedule and you build in time for it. So like Hope Michael said, if we're gonna do it, we need to give them the opportunity to do it, because it's not just two teachers, it's the specialists and the special ed teachers, and you know, our EL teacher is gonna be in there. If there's a speech and language kid, they're gonna be in there. You know, sometimes they take 15 minutes, sometimes they take 45. Depends what you're doing. But it's a real good touch point every week.
Then they also have to factor in, okay, what's our typical high flying AP student gonna take? So you have to spread all the AP classes out at different hours so that they can.
There's AP classes that kids take typically at different age levels. Some you can take anytime, but there's kind of typical ones, like AP Lang, they're typically gonna take as a junior, Lid's gonna be a senior. AP Chem, junior, senior, so you do kind of, usually seniors, you do kind of spread those things out as best you can. In the end, kids always have to make choices. You know, in the end, they're always gonna make choices, and that's where, you know, we talk to the staff about, you need to figure out what the kids want, and, you know, like some of you guys that were here for curriculum council, you see what Spanish was doing, they've seen their numbers drop. But what are they doing? They're talking to the kids, what do you need? What do you want? You know, they're trying to propose classes that the kids will take. And, you know, that's what's happened with tech ed, family consumer science has boomed. You know, 12 years ago, what do they have, Chris? 5 PE teachers?
Yeah.
We had 5 PE teachers when you know, came. And now we have
1.5 tech ed teachers.
They're loaded, yeah, 1.5 tech ed and a 0.8 family consumer science. So you look at where those programs have boomed, but you also look at, you know, what's the economic need in their area. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out why. So that's how we put the master schedule together.
Yeah, you probably don't want to.
I can do this, because this has already happened. Well, maybe I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't do that, just because one isn't necessarily. Most of them already happened, or when we look for our, you know, people have asked me, well, where are you gonna cut? I don't know. Because if we're gonna use attrition, every position that goes, we're gonna look at that position. Can we cover it? Can we get creative and cover it? You know, so far, the ones that have gone, we've figured out plans to be able to cover it. But, you know, if I have a teacher that's the only teacher who teaches something and they leave, I'm not gonna have somebody else to cover it, and that's gonna be one that.
Utility teacher that leaves, like Becky.
What's that?
If Becky were to leave, your
Oh, don't even
utility.
talk about that.
Utility plan.
He can't retire till after. Any questions? You know, when Kyle left, you realized you only German, no, you still had 2 then, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and now there's 1. If that person were to leave, either we cut the German program or we hire a teacher. Kyle can come back.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Any questions for me on this?
They wouldn't let me, they let me drive bus, but they won't let me be on the board. And
That's right.
Priorities, man.
Right, then we'll go into the details on what we're looking at, for the reductions at the high school. I think one of the challenges, the high school from a student enrollment standpoint hasn't gone down, so that's why we don't project very much reductions, because there's not a lot of wiggle room.
Right.
And so it has more significant impacts on class size and so forth. At that level. So you want to
Do you want to take a 5-minute break? or
Yes.
just-
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Done right?
No, I have mine all here. Do it.
Hey, Val.
Yeah.
It's okay to make any control, because my is like on top of mine.
Yeah.
What did you?
Oh, you want?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
In case.
Yeah. I had to walk out.
And
That was awful. Right?
I'm pretty sure it is in summer. That's not an issue, like she dropped the name today. But I'm pretty sure.
Even if she doesn't.
And I
And.
sat all day.
Oh, yeah,
so-
so. Did that for you, so I came back, and like, my mom works from time to time, so I didn't, see her. She says the wrong number. Sure, got it. Like, I said, congratulations, and you reached your hand up, you're going.
Yes.
And I'd like, the follow up.
Yes. So, I give you small and
Flashbacks. All our gentlemen were-
She sees that number on paper. All right.
I think.
Last year was different.
Yes.
Because it happened after we actually had
Yeah.
this year.
Exactly.
So.
Terrible.
Yeah, we needed to bring them.
No, I get it.
But if you
Oh, so many.
Yeah, I know. But you got projects, you probably
It's not like
do.
we're really getting rain today, it's just heavy mist. all
Yes,
day.
just enough to make it miserable for.
Right.
At least it's not as windy as it was yesterday.
Oh my gosh, the last week. Yeah, next week was pretty good too. Yep. Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah. I mean, we had this.
Well,
No, it was already-
No.
It's like a pattern change now.
They both.
In March with the band at Spirit Park Color Guard, so I was a rifle and I marched in Boston.
Oh.
We wore shorts and t-shirts. It was 40 degrees and raining.
Oh, yeah.
I was so frozen, I was like, this is not supposed to happen. And it's May.
Yep.
That's record.
That was her.
Yeah, I was just trying to. There's no song.
Sponsors and stuff.
Yeah, I think that depends on what you have or if it's
Yeah. It is. And you could take the only other one, and I think I've ever read for me.
Sorry, I have a really good signature.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah, I'm talking
Yours is
that.
very small.
But that's that was just a try this out, wasn't it, Sarah? Yeah.
I don't think we really have.
It was an independent study, I think.
Well, maybe we didn't have.
Yeah.
One of the independent studies.
I think it was.
AP World. AP World.
Hey. I think you left.
That much fun.
Oh, you think so? And guess what? We all want to meet you. We're gonna be- Hey, by the way,
Yeah,
All right.
we're good.
Okay, all right.
All right, let's, resume.
So one of the other areas, in addition to talking about the middle school, high school programs and staffing and impact was student fees. We had a little discussion on that. I thought, well, before we get into the survey that I'll share with you, I wanted to kind of give you at least a sense of kind of what's allowed, what's not allowed, because there is state statute that pertains specifically to student fees. And really the center of that is section 10 of the Wisconsin Constitution that basically says the legislature shall provide by law for the establishment of district schools. Such schools shall be free and without charge for tuition for all children between the ages of 20 years. So there's been a number of kind of questions or realities to that wording, and the Supreme Court ruled back in the 70s that gave us some guidelines, and basically they established some benchmarks here that really talked about there could be some charges for consumable items for extracurricular, but also that indicated that there's certainly things that we can't charge for, such as instructional costs, building costs, all of those things. So they really put together some very limited things that could be allowable in terms of charges. And they did that intentionally, I think, through that process. So there are some samples here in terms of what is allowed, what isn't allowed, but really it did put together some very limitations on what's allowed, and certainly may not charge for instructional time such as teacher salary, apparatus, building costs, and maintenance. So, that's kind of our background in terms of what's allowed.
It's interesting. I didn't know. I know we always have the fee waiver there, but I didn't realize that was part of the Supreme Court ruling as well.
Yeah.
You need to have that.
You gotta give them that. Yep. And usually free and reduced lunch is kind of the criteria that most districts use, yeah. So then, well, what are fees? How do they compare? So I reached out to the area schools here in Walworth County just to get kind of a sense of what, let's see here, if I can capture everyone here. She looks like I can. So, and we broke them down between levels, and some school districts, you'll notice, charge different fees for different levels. So, we have a standard fee, what we call a consumable fee. There's a laptop insurance option as well.
We don't do a registration fee.
Registration fee, technically, I don't know why they would use that title, because that probably isn't a legal title.
Oh,
I mean, registration, you can't charge for registration.
yeah,
You can charge for consumable things.
yeah.
So I think for the school districts that filled out the survey, they plopped it in and they call it a registration fee.
Got it.
But I don't know if they all use that term, so. Because what does that mean? You're filling out a piece of paper and you're charging people? I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
but it's probably for relatively the same purpose of consumable stuff.
yeah.
So you can kind of see how the different schools charge. And of course, Lake Geneva, you got Badger as a high school, so they don't have anything there at the elementary, middle school level. And then Williams Bay, Delavan. Whitewater is the one district that really doesn't charge any fees.
Oh.
I thought that was kind of interesting. Then I included Fort Accident, Quantico, East Troy, and Burlington. So,
Yeah, what's East Troy?
that's just their fee. Yeah. That's, they charge a fee. And it looks like, if you look at East Troy, they got $90, I think, for the elementary, 95, and then 100. So they increase it by
If we
$5.
doubled ours, it would be
Yeah.
$90.
One of the reasons I pulled in Quantico, because I figured as you get towards that Waukesha County, Milwaukee, their fees would probably be a little higher. And they were to a certain extent, but then you have other examples. I know Burlington increased their fees quite a bit.
It looks like, yeah, Fort's got all kinds of extras.
Yeah.
In Spanish.
So I don't know if you can say there's a theme here of where everyone is, because it's kind of all over the place. And again, you see, the high school has their fees. They do have, the waiver, and everyone's pretty consistent with that. I see in Burlington, they now have a foundation that's helping to offset some fees for students as well. So I don't know if this is helpful. I know we talked about doubling the fees here in Elkhorn. But it certainly is, at least now we have some information on what other school districts charge. And some of these are really voluntary, like parking fee. I mean, Dan, not everyone charges a parking fee. I know not everyone pays a parking fee, probably if they don't need parking, so.
There's kids that are parking, but ours is extremely low.
Yeah, right, and I think probably as you get closer to Milwaukee, it's much more expensive because they have limited parking. Yeah. So.
Who's that? That's charging $180?
Is that East Troy?
$180, I believe that is East Troy. No, it's McQuantico.
Oh, interesting.
Which I think will be fun.
I mean,
Well, yeah, you mentioned that options.
But the parking fee, to be honest with you, they would pay that. If you want to park on school property, you pay that.
Yeah.
I don't think they have any problem getting $180.
I think it's a question.
How many spots?
But I think if you update a little bit and then make it seems dear.
Or cheer it, those closer.
Just like sporting events.
Yeah, I mean, the $180, the average out to be like $20 a month.
How many spots are there?
The high school? Oh. Okay, do you have any, roughly how many spots do we have for students?
Oh, it should.
You the staff ones that they use also?
Oh, yeah.
They're closer.
Yeah, I can't tell you anymore, because when we built that new parking lot, I think it was an increase of 60 or 90.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
It wasn't as big an increase because we lost some other areas, tennis courts. We have enough parking. The only time we get tight is when like this time of year, when seniors are still in the building and sophomores are getting their license.
Oh.
That's when it gets tight. But the more we have now, we kind of open up the pool for kids that have modified schedules parked there, because we don't want, when it's busy, we don't want kids parking there because they get hit when they walk across the street. So we don't have a problem with parking. The vast majority of the year we're fine.
Hey, they're wondering number of spots to kind of figure how much money could be generated if you charge students parking.
400 juniors and seniors, more than that, 450 juniors and seniors. Most of them, or a good chunk of them are driving. I don't know, is it 280, 290 spots? That's ringing a bell in my head, but.
We could probably go back and look and see how much revenue did the $10 parking fee generate?
25.
Yeah.
It's 25.
Oh, 25.
But we do prorated.
The work.
Yeah, but how many actually take advantage of it? Right. So, I mean, we have some of that data broken down in terms of how much should we actually collect in those different categories, so.
I mean, you can't up the work permit, that's.
No, that's just a
something that's
standard, yeah,
regulated.
exactly. And the other thing we have with the number, especially courses at the high school, we have resale fees. So when I say resale, you know, traditional thing would be a woods course, where they're purchasing wood, they're making a product and taking the product. Family and consumer ed would have that.
Yeah.
So we do have a number of resale fees. From a parent standpoint, it's still probably a fee. And I think even like in the high school course book, those fees are identified within the course. If I remember right.
What I would say about our course fees, I don't believe we've raised them since I've been here.
No.
And with the cost of everything, like if you think about our fees for our foods classes, you know, with the cost of everything going up, we haven't increased those fees. We're not covering, we're taking money into those
Yeah, we need to cover
budgets
those.
to cover them. But, you know, and even like if you look at welding, just the cost of welding gas and the cost of metal, the cost of wood went up. I mean,
Yeah.
they get creative and get some donations from some local companies and things like that, but the cost of product, we really have not raised our fees in those areas.
But even with resale, what happens with that is whatever we collect, we spend. So it becomes an offset, which is a little
Right.
different than these fees, which kind of
Right.
offset operational things. If that makes sense. Operational supplies. So,
Yeah, at bare minimum, we need to be covering our costs.
yeah. So probably reducing those resales, and I think, I was at the high school last week, I think Jenny Newmar kind of cornered me, said, you know, I haven't had to come back in terms of requesting additional money yet, but that's coming. Because usually she
request
does.
is from me.
I haven't sent her your way yet.
Well, if there's 100 parking permits that gets purchased, if we were to increase that to $100 for the parking permit, that's $30,000 in revenue generated just from the parking.
On the parking alone.
Yeah.
You can probably triple that, close to triple that, if you're thinking about how many they purchase.
I'd support a higher parking fee all day. Driving's a privilege, parking's a privilege. It's
400?
not a right, it's a privilege.
No, I mean, I was factoring 400 permits purchased.
Oh, 400 per, I got you.
Yeah. Not $400, yeah, 400 permits. I just factored it at a $75 increase. So $100 parking fee, that's 30,000.
Driving's a privilege, it's not a right.
And we could incorporate another idea, if I haven't talked to the high school or the buildings and grounds, but what Burlington does with their painting the parking stalls, that's kind of, I don't know. I think they charge a premium for that, but
I think that's totally equitable to me.
you don't like that?
I hate it.
Why do you hate it?
Managing.
I'll live with it,
Yeah.
but I just don't like it.
So, I don't know the concept. Tell me the
Parking at a
concept.
certain spot.
They decorate their spot, like they purchase their spot. I don't know how much more they pay for
Well,
it.
they buy, the seniors buy their spots and then they get to decorate their spot. My thought is, if you want a good spot, get to school early.
Yeah.
That's my, I mean, if I don't wanna pay the extra price, but I come to school early, why should I have to walk further than somebody who's gonna?
Yeah.
That's where it
I get that.
doesn't sit great with me.
Yeah.
I
It does
think-
encourage people to get there in time and.
Yeah, I think if you want a good spot, get there early.
Well, and you're also dealing
Doesn't
with
make it say money.
enforcement.
Then you have
You
an
assign-
enforcement that somebody parked on my painted.
Yeah,
spot.
exactly. Or even if you didn't, but if you assign spots, you're gonna
Then
deal
you got-
with enforcement.
yeah, the parking.
Because someone's gonna say,
Yeah.
I'm late for school, I'm gonna park right there because it's available.
Right.
So you want to increase to 100? I've got no problem with that.
Yeah, I think that they too.
There you go.
There's kids driving some pretty nice cars out there.
Go back to the Starbucks. and
Some of those
Cumberland's
kids have
down there.
nicer cars than I do.
You can
That's what I think, if they're going to Starbucks every
Well,
week.
I don't have, I think we should increase it, but I think we should have an over under on how many calls we get from Casey's. Kids parking at Casey's to walk over.
Well, the kids to get their permits pulled, they gotta find somewhere.
Yeah. Or I bet you on that Market Street, we're gonna start seeing.
We need VIP.
Yeah, but
parking
they'll
lot.
get
Let's say they'll get their steps in.
Right. So I'm hearing there's an interest in increasing parking fees, maybe to $100. The resale should capture our costs. What about our other fees?
What about the athletic fee? Like, we have some kids that are paying $45 and they participate in one sport. We have kids that are participating in 3 sports and they're still only paying $45.
That is true. Yep.
That doesn't even come close to covering the cost of transporting them to games.
We modify that to $45 per sport.
Per sport.
Why is it per family?
That's for
That's
the,
the family.
That's what
element.
we have.
And I would say
So,
that is the
okay,
big too. I would
it's
increase that.
isn't that for the, that's for like
That's for,
admission?
yeah,
right?
It's for home admission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
You didn't know you could have saved money by buying like a season pass for all the home games.
I just follow Tanya and borrow money from somebody when I forget my kids.
Thoughts from the high school on the athletic?
The only thing I would, I mean, we've thought about that we've talked about it many times. Part of that is that secondary insurance is included in that cost too, right, Bill?
in the 45?
In the 45. But, you know, our goal is equity, access. We want all of our kids to be doing
Yeah.
co-curriculars. We know that they do better when they are.
Right.
And even that $45, we've never since I've been here, we ever told a kid you can't play a sport because you don't have that $45.
Right.
But you wouldn't want that to be pull kids out because we want more kids, not less.
Do those fees, do we also waive those fees?
Yeah.
Okay. So they can still go with the fee waiver.
They do fee waivers, but yeah, but we also know that people don't ask.
I don't disagree with you because youth football had the lowest fee at $100. And we were struggling to have 105 kids. When we moved it to $10, we shot up to 200 kids the next year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's surprising how that
What if you
little
did
bit
a
of
split?
monetary difference makes, but.
What if you did a split? $45 for your first sport, $20 for any additional sport?
I don't think there's a lot of money there, and I think we're spending a lot of time trying to
Nickel and dime?
nickel and dime ourselves. We're probably costing ourselves a lot more money at the end of the day, because somebody's got to administer all this stuff. I'd
Makes
rather go
sense.
over after the parking because it's a real tangible thing that is
Yes.
substantial dollars.
Okay.
the consumable fee actually was increased, I think, last year, because it used to be $25.
Yeah.
So that was adjusted. Okay.
That's just the normal consumable.
Yeah,
Everybody
right.
pays.
Everybody pays at all levels, yeah.
And again, given what you said earlier, is that covering our bases,
Well, I think,
giving cost of increase to others?
yeah, I think for the resale items, I think that those need to be looked at. If we're not collecting enough money for food or
Mhm.
woods class,
Right.
then we need to adjust those.
Yes.
And that's almost a course by course kind of fee. We can look at that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hearing is the directive to make sure that our consumable courses, that we're charging enough to cover their consumables. So we're not using internal budgetary dollars
Mhm.
to pay for the food costs or for the supplies. The second piece is increase the parking.
Mhm.
And I don't want to belabor it from the 10 standpoint, but what if we increase the athletic fee roughly 10% and just went to $50? We would say, yeah, we got an increase on the co-curricular and the athletic fee as well. I don't care either way, so I don't think
If
it
you
definitely
can't
doesn't
afford-
make a difference,
if they
that's more of
can't
a
afford
symbolic.
points, yeah. $5 difference is not gonna make or break somebody's decision.
Yeah, the athletic thing, we want everybody to participate in athletics.
Yes.
You can get to school. If you want to drive, that's a privilege. You can take the
Right.
bus.
Right.
But when it comes to athletics, if you want to play athletics, we should allow that to happen. Parking, that's a right, and that's a privilege.
Yeah.
Athletics, let's let them.
So everything else is good then?
And the yearbook fee is covering the
That's
cost of
just
the
the
yearbook.
cost of the yearbook.
Yes.
That
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 comes-
changes every year.
I was gonna say,
That
Okay.
changes depending
60 is
on.
actually low. I think I
I don't
paid
think-
72 this year, something like
Well,
that.
60 might have been the early fee. Right now, they're 80 if the kids are trying to buy them now.
Okay, and that, but that's adjusting as needed.
Okay.
It's- Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Cover the
Yeah.
cost. of
Okay.
We order the yearbooks directly from Justin's. It's whatever Justin's told us our cost.
And it varies from grade level to grade level. Or, I mean, not at the high school, like the middle school has a different yearbook, a different fee, the
Okay.
high schools, whatever their cost is, so it's cost them.
Okay.
Is there anything further down that list?
No. All right, so that's fees. Fund 80, because we've talked about a number of positions that could be Fund 80 funded. And at the last meeting, we talked about one of the things that is recommended from the DPI is you have a policy in place, you reference Fund 80 and how, what's eligible, not eligible. We have a community service policy, but it's not very strong, I'll be honest with you. It doesn't specifically say a Fund 80 community service fund. So I asked Jody to pull on the new policy samples.
Okay, so it's from Neola.
Yeah.
From the NOLA, so this is their sample policy, and I thought it was really good. I think the only modification that we have is the term program rather than activities and services.
Yep.
Typically, it's a policy, this would go through the policy committee and then come to the board. One of the things that Jason and I talked about is because we're spending so much time talking about community service, getting this policy in place early might be a really good idea. And if the board's comfortable with this could be a first reading at the next board meeting and then a second reading at the following board meeting, which means it wouldn't go through necessarily the policy committee as a
We're
separate.
all here anyway.
If the board-
Make it a first read.
Yeah.
Yeah, this could be a first reading.
Well, yeah, I guess it could be.
It's an official.
We're only required to have one reading,
We
so
are.
we can, this isn't listed as a first reading, but at the next one, we could
Yeah.
choose to just do one reading and vote. Yeah,
And that would be Monday night.
Correct. Tuesday. We'll be here Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah.
Or Tuesday night. That's all right. Normally Monday night, but Tuesday.
So we could, we could put on, we'll have to just let Jody know right away in the morning for the agenda, yeah.
All right. So with that, I have, we've looked at this before. I don't know if we need to walk through all these items. And some of these numbers will probably change, particularly some of the high school and middle schools. We have further discussions. But I do want to highlight at least, some of the things here that we talked about that could be community service, like a part-time custodian going to full-time and making that Fund 80, middle school sports, our SRO officer, a couple of instructional positions, which I think would be more of the social worker positions that we have. And then the strategic partnership position as well.
So some of these numbers are gonna change because like the student fees, we're not increasing them by 100.
Right.
We're not bringing a 30,000
Right.
on that.
Right.
Not 100.
So the
That number will go
budget,
down.
yes, you're right.
You're right.
Yep.
And that's why I've got some of these highlighted in yellow because there's still probably some pending
And then
changes.
the
Right.
middle school convergence, that one is gonna be,
We could have greater attrition than that number that's budgeted.
Right.
And, I did meet with the high school staff recently and, afterwards, and we spoke about that conversion. And while we talked about perhaps looking more at the high school one next year, there are several that would be ready to convert going into next year. Such as like the, esports. Do you remember who else? Oh, the,
Theater.
drama theater.
That should be a big.
Devin Webb. Is that what you're talking about?
The,
What are you talking about?
like the drama club.
Oh,
The clubs at the high
clubs.
school that they said,
Got
yeah,
it.
we could convert to community
Oh,
service,
got
and
it.
that would be
Okay. Sorry.
beneficial as well from their perspective. So originally, we had talked about waiting on the high school ones, but there are organizations, and we already have the powerlifting with the community service program in high school. So we could move forward on this.
Which I think you're talking about this here, Jason, if I remember right. So
Yeah,
that category.
yeah.
we just need to be careful as a district that we're meeting the criteria that is allowed through that process.
Right.
So I just caution everyone with that. And ultimately, we won't probably know that until we go through the 1-year audit next year. Updated forecast model, I just wanted to share with the board, and again, this is still fluid. But a couple of things have changed, and I've just highlighted them on here. Typically, we'll see students move in that either require special ed or English language services, and that's eligible for a transfer of service. That means we're allowed to increase our revenue cap to accommodate those needs to those kids. And at this point, it's built in a factor of 2 teaching positions. And Emily and I haven't really talked about it in details yet, but we're allowed to claim what's called 70% of what we think those costs would be, because eventually we'll get state aid on the special ed positions, and they deduct that from our transfer service. So since this year we had 181,000, I just built in as a placeholder, possibly 2 positions to transfer service. The other thing I changed is I updated our end-of-year fund balance based on a projection that I shared with you at the last board meeting. So that's what's highlighted here. And then if we move all of those positions that we identified to Fund 80, what does that look like in terms of how does that affect Fund 80's levy? And then right now, early in the process, what does it look like for a total levy and a mill rate impact? These numbers will change. They will change, I guarantee it. But I wanted to at least be able to share with the board kind of what things will look like. We don't know what state aids are going to be. And we may not know that for some time.
I
But
thought our deficit was gonna be more like 2.2. I think for this year, based on. 'Cause what were we at, 3.4? Before. Didn't you tell us that the, our deficit was gonna be about 1.2 million less?
yes, I didn't change this.
Oh,
number.
you didn't change it.
I changed the fund balance number only,
Oh, got it.
because that would have been lower.
Okay,
You're right, because if I changed this, I would have had to change it. I didn't do that,
Okay.
so
Alright.
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay.
So then really, we're using that 2 number. This becomes 13.6, and then how does that affect in the future? That's what I wanted to show.
Yeah.
So with that, the only other thing, unless we want to run some scenarios, and we could run a million different scenarios, is there's so much unknowns at this point. But I wanted to at least kind of highlight, where are we at in this overall process? And this yellow line is kind of where we're at today. And then on the 27th, which is next Tuesday, the board will be looking at considering contracts and compensation for support staff and administrators. And then June, typically, we have a first reading of a preliminary budget, and then at the second meeting is the second reading of the preliminary budget. July 1st, we get state aid estimates, and then the fourth Monday is the annual meeting. My guess is during the month of June, what we start with as kind of projections will change. So it's very likely that as we know more information on the state budget, that we'll need to modify as we go, if that makes sense. Because we just don't know the measurements today. We may not know as of July 1st. I think the goal is always to have a final state budget, but I can remember many years, 4th of July, we're still waiting to hear what happens. So as long as the board understands that it unfortunately is going to be maybe more fluid than a typical year, which always has some fluid to it anyway, because we can't finalize our budget until we know our third party account, we know how our property values are going to actually. So it all goes back to October. What more information does the board want before we start meeting in June to go through a preliminary budget? I know we're going to talk later tonight on some details.
your gut telling you?
That's not good.
So with what we've been talking about the last month and a half, are we gonna, what's your gut telling you? Are we gonna be able to have a balanced budget?
A balanced budget? No.
Okay.
I'll tell
So
you,
how much more do we have to
October-
cut?
Well, we assumed this was about 2.5,
2.5.
because we were spreading that out over 2 years. Now, ultimately, where we end up, maybe a little less here, but then we'll have to make up the difference here. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And I think we're in a position, we talked about, we're starting at a good place financially, that I think we have that flexibility. You know, these are pretty conservative numbers in terms of what the state is going to do. And I think that they will only get better. The question is just how much.
Yeah, so this is based on worst case scenario, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the court already ruled that the 325 per pupil, or the 380, whatever that
Right.
revenue limit
325
says, is in there. That's the assumption that we have
Right.
made. We don't have any assumption of any additional dollars from the state aside from that, correct?
Correct.
So anything between, there's Governor Evers' budget proposal, which was almost $4 million, better like 3.5, to, absolutely nothing changes, which is 0, will fall somewhere in between that. would be-
And this is not assuming any increase in open enrollment.
Correct.
So we could have some additional
Right.
revenues
Right.
in there too.
Right. And then we highlighted here, if the governor's budget went through,
Yes.
that's proposed, which it won't happen.
Right,
But, that would generate almost $3 million in additional revenue for the
Right.
district.
but
So the
so
question.
maybe we can land at 1.5 or something.
Mhm. It's not comfortable not knowing the
Yeah,
answer to
it's
those
terrible.
questions.
Terrible.
I mean, it's.
We're just not gonna know.
Yeah.
Well,
Right,
Mhm.
We never know.
But I think if you go back to that forecast model, and even if we go back to what that ad hoc committee's recommendation was, it was to, as part of our budgeting process, to, for lack of a better term, to deficit spend a little bit to spend down that fund balance. And so what we're projecting doing 2.5 and then 1.5 in savings and or revenue generation. Assuming that there's the worst case scenario from the state, that still puts us at is that an 19.4?
Yeah, at the end of the second year.
You're still pretty
You're
close
still-
to 20% fund
Mhm.
balance, after this next biennium.
Mhm.
yeah,
And that's assuming worst case scenario from the state
Right.
funding
Right.
situation and not having an increase in the open enrollment.
It gets difficult really looking at the second year because
Yeah.
we don't even have the first year. And certainly depending on that, it does give the board and the district time to plan for the 26-27 school year. I think that's pretty much all I had for budget discussion tonight. Unless there's other questions.
Well, we do have the closed session to go into the specific detail in there as it relates to
Yeah.
specific personnel.
so I don't spend a motion.
I move that we adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 1985, Fair 1, Fair C, to discuss employee positions for 2025-26 school year.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to go to contemplate a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 1C to discuss employee positions for the 25-26 school year. The school board will not reconvene in open session. Roll call vote.
Mr. Andre? Yes. Eric Gordon? Mrs. Mitchell?
Yeah.
Mrs. Costa?
Yes.
Go ahead and close.